So the passage that I'm going to preach about today is the Gerasene Demoniac. And it is such a rich passage. There is so much that we could say about it, not least of which that this legion, which is an unmistakable reference to the Roman army, ends up drowned in the sea, just like the Egyptian army at the Exodus. But I'm not going to go there today. Today, I want to talk about this passage as an analogy for addiction. Here is a man who is homeless. He's living among the dead. In the Mark version of the story, he's cutting himself with stones. He harms himself. And both Luke and Mark tell us that the chains that they put on him are broken. The guards can't stop him. Nothing can stop him from what appears to us to be insanity. And I think that sounds an awful lot like addiction. Addiction is something I know a little bit about. I am in recovery for 35 years. And I did not plan to become an addict. When you asked me as a kid what I wanted to be, that was not on my list. I wanted to be a fireman and a policeman and an artist and a teacher and a scientist, and the list went on and on. And I think maybe that kind of shows that there was already the seed planted because I wanted to do everything. I wanted more. I was also the outcast. I never fit in with the other kids. I didn't play sports. I always said the wrong thing. And as a consequence, I got bullied a lot in school and on the bus. Did not have very many friends. And I lived in constant loneliness. And even as a child, I wondered, what is the point of this life? When I was 15 years old, I decided that if I smoked marijuana, it would make me cool. I desperately wanted to be cool. Well, it didn't make me cool, but it did change the way I felt. And that was a revelation to me. I did not have to feel like I had always felt. Not long after that, I started drinking alcohol, and that was even better. It didn't just change the way I felt. I didn't have to feel anything if I drank enough. And it went on from there. I tried everything I could get my hands on. I ended up turning to cocaine to try to control my alcohol use, and eventually heroin to try to control my cocaine use. By age 25, I was a mess. I was addicted to alcohol, cocaine, and heroin. And there was no hope in my life. There were many, many mornings I would wake up thinking, why can't I just die? Why do I have to keep going? And I had tried to quit. But this is something that a lot of people don't understand if they haven't been there. Living without drugs was worse than living with them. What happened for me was somebody that I used to use with, who had gone to 12-step meetings, invited me to go with him. And I was desperate enough to give it a try. And I didn't get it right away because I thought, well, I'll go to a few meetings. They're going to teach me the secret to have willpower, and I'll be able to stop. And that's what society tells us, right? We need willpower. Well, it took me a while, but I learned it wasn't about willpower. Addiction is something that we cannot fix for ourselves. We need God's help. And in order to accept God's help, we have to surrender. We have to come to what we call in the 12-step programs a bottom, a place of desperation. That happened for me when, after months of slipping in and out of the program, I woke up one morning and realized that I didn't have a choice. I was condemned to drink and use. And that was the point at which I was not only able to ask for help, but to accept it. And I began working the 12 steps, and I began actively seeking recovery. And I was transformed over time. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but first I want to say we live in a society that tells us, just pull yourself together, use your willpower, just quit. Why can't you be like everybody else? We call addiction a disease. We treat it with incarceration. Can you imagine treating cancer or diabetes with incarceration? We're going to lock you up until you get better. And not surprisingly, the success rate for people coming out of incarceration is just about zero. It doesn't work. If I was face to face with everybody, I would say, do you know what the statistic is for people coming out of rehab centers? But I can't do that. So I will just tell you, it's between 5 and 10%. 9 out of 10 people who come out of a rehab don't stay clean for a year. The statistics for people who go to 12-step meetings, 5 to 10%. 9 out of 10 don't stay clean for a year. But statistics for people who go to 12-step meetings consistently for at least 6 months and get involved, 70%. 7 out of 10 people do stay clean. And the study that was done showed that they stay clean for up to 16 years. That was the latest measurement that they took. Now, the point is, we can't change ourselves. There is no secret we can learn to suddenly not want to do drugs. The book Alcoholics Anonymous says we have placed ourselves beyond human aid. We need God. But most of us, even if we believe in God, we don't trust God. We started using drugs because of some pain that we had that drugs fixed. What kind of a God allows that kind of pain? And then we've got the shame of the things that we did while we were in our addiction. We don't want God to know where we are. And if he does know where we are, we don't want to call attention to ourselves. It takes a moment of desperation where we really recognize that there is no way out for us to break down and ask for help. We have to commit to something new. We have to do something different. This is not a thinking problem. This is a living problem. A man named Chuck Chamberlain used to say, you cannot think your way into right living, but you can live your way into right thinking. And what's interesting is when a person comes into recovery, the thing that they need most is not what you would think. What they need most is something to do with their time. Addiction is a full-time job. We wake up thinking about it. We're trying to find it. We're trying to finance it. And then when we finally get it, we stay loaded as long as possible. And then after that, we deal with the consequences. It is a full-time job. If you remove that from your life, what do? What fills that time? And so often we expect, and the people around us expect, we'll get a job, we'll go home, we'll eat dinner, we'll watch TV and go to bed. All the while, our brain is churning with all of the things that worry us, pain us, cause us guilt and shame. And the burning question is, what is it for? We used to have an answer for that. Our life revolved around the drug. Take it away. Now, what is it for? Why am I going to work? Why am I doing all of this? I don't have a purpose. What's interesting is that when you talk to people with addiction long enough, you realize addiction provides purpose for life. It provides structure. It provides identity. And it provides a moral code that does not agree with society's moral code, but it's very well defined. Anything that gets you loaded is okay. And if you take that away, you've lost purpose, identity, structure, and moral code. What do you have left? In a sense, addiction fills the role of a religion. In the sociological sense, addiction is a religion. And there is at least one theologian who's described it as false worship. We follow our drug as if it was a god. We turn to it above all else. When everything else fails, our drug is there. We sacrifice anything to that drug. In order for us to recover from addiction, we need something else that fills that role. Something like the gospel. And the church has the gospel. So then the question becomes, how can the church effectively help people who desperately need what it has? And here's the catch. If I worship my false god every day, if I sacrifice to my false god every day, how often do I have to worship the true God? Every day. How often do I need to give thanks and praise to the true God? Every day. How often do I need to practice discipleship to the true God? Every day. How often does the church meet? You can see the problem there. We need discipleship, and we need it every day. We have to follow, we have to replace what we used to do, which was a daily, all day long, mind encompassing journey. And we have to replace that with discipleship. Imagine what a discipleship like that might look like. We also can't do it alone. We need to walk with people. And most of us who have been in addiction have done things that we're ashamed of. So we need to walk with people who will hear what we've done without judgment, without shaming. We need to walk with people who can grasp that all our lives we've had one tool. We did not develop the tools that everybody else has for dealing with conflict, disappointment, depression, all of these other things that we face in life. We only had one tool. And often people look at us and say, why can't you deal with that? Well, we don't know how. We gave up our one tool. Because of this, working with addicts is not something that should be undertaken lightly. We have to look at ourselves and recognize our strengths and weaknesses. Can the church disciple people? Well, I sure hope so. I hope that the answer is yes. Can the church relate to people coming from that kind of a background? That's a good question. And it's a question that we need to ask ourselves. I think a more important question is, why would or should the church get involved? And the obvious reason is because people with addiction are suffering. They suffer like the Gerasene Demoniac. They live amongst the tombs. They hurt themselves as well as everyone around them. But there's an even better reason. If this is something that human beings cannot solve, if this is something that only God can solve, then every person in recovery is evidence of God's work in our world. Every person in recovery is literally a miracle. And that is something that is beautiful to behold. And the third reason is, when you have someone who is in recovery, who is truly committed to it, who is practicing their recovery just like they practice their addiction, that is an incredibly committed person, and they can do wonderful things. It's interesting to me that with the Gerasene Demoniac, after he's healed, he sits talking with Jesus, apparently normal, and everyone is amazed. And when Jesus leaves, he begs to go with him. And Jesus says, no, go tell others what has been done for you. In Psalm 51, just get over to Psalm 51 here. It says, create in me a pure heart, O God, renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. Then I will teach transgressors your ways so that sinners will turn back to you. The most powerful tool in helping people recover from addiction is a person recovering from addiction, because we've been there. We know the tricks our minds play. We know the pain. We know the experience. That doesn't mean that there's nothing the church can do. It's not easy work, But we as recovering addicts, need people to walk with us. We need people to teach us discipleship. And we need it every day. It's so easy to look at a recovering addict and say, that person needs a job and a place to stay. And we do need those things. But what we need most is discipleship. So when I talk to a congregation, I ask, will you be that person? Can you walk with a person who may have a bad history, use coarse language, and may even relapse a few times? It can be disappointing work. And yet, where there is breath, there is hope. That man who took me to my first 12-step meeting went out for another 10 years and practiced his addiction. He's now been clean over 25 years. Where there is breath, there is hope. Can you walk with someone who doesn't have the same tools for living that you do? Can't handle finances, doesn't know how to deal with conflict, either runs or blows up. Can you look at someone like that and see the potential that they have because of the devotion that they need to have? If we're going to live, we need to be as devoted to God as we were to our drug. And if you've been around addicts, you know how devoted we can be to our drug. Most people would look at the Gerasene Demoniac and say that this person is hopeless. There is nothing that we can do for him. We can't chain him. We can't lock him up. We can't heal him. But Jesus can. And it's the same with addiction. We lock them up. It doesn't help. We get them jobs. It doesn't help. But Jesus can heal us. Jesus can heal us. And we can be the hands and feet of Jesus. Thanks for joining me this morning.